anything?
It might.
We are live.
We are live. All right. This is the Podcaster Roundtable Accessibility Panel. I am the moderator, Bridge Geene, she, her, they, them, whatever your pleasure. And then the panelists care to introduce themselves.
Sure.
I don't know, Mischa, I guess, since you started talking.
Okay. Hi, I'm Mischa Stanton. I make a bunch of podcasts, mostly fiction, but some of it not. I use they, them pronouns. And I guess relevant to this panel is, I should say, I am a patient diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome type 8.
Erin?
Me. I'm Erin Kyan. I also make podcasts, not as many as Mischa yet.
No one does and no one should. Don't worry about it.
I use he, him pronouns exclusively. And I have fibromyalgia and CFS or ME, depending on what country you're in, depending on what you call it. I also have PTSD. And I have most of my arts industry experience is in disability arts. So yeah, that's me. And I appear to have lost connection. I'm going to cut my video again and see if that helps. Okay, good.
Eli? Did we lose Eli again?
We might have lost Eli.
Lost to the void.
Okay, that was what made me worried that I'd lost stuff, because Eli's frame froze.
I guess we'll just... Eli, have you returned from the void? Oh, and Jeff just joined.
And Jeff!
Yay!
Yay!
Hello.
And I just got dropped from the too.
Froze on us. And we're like, oh no. If you could introduce yourself, Eli.
I could do that. Hi, I am Eli. I run Accessthepod on Twitter. I do not run any podcasts. I am autistic, and because of that, I have autism disorder. I also have depression and anxiety and chronic pain. Yes.
All right, and then Jeff, you get to introduce yourself, and then we can move on to the questions.
Sorry, I missed Eli. What pronouns do you use? I missed that.
I use they, them. Sorry, I did not say that.
Hi. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry, I'm having some connection issues, but I'm Jeff Van Dreason. I'm the co-creator, writer, sound designer, producer, editor, whatever, of Greater Boston. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm sorry I'm late. I'll keep it brief.
We've got some very good people on this panel. Let's just get started by, I mean, some of you mentioned it in your introductions, but what does accessibility mean to you? Let's start with Erin.
I will put my camera back on then. So accessibility at its root is just about making something available to a larger audience of people. When we talk about accessibility, usually we're talking about disabled people, but the word does actually have use even outside that. But yeah, making podcasting accessible for disabled people, I think most people think of that as making it accessible for deaf or hard of hearing people, but it's actually a much bigger area than that. So yeah, it's about making it available, making it possible for people to access it, hence accessibility. So that's what it means to me.
Any takers for next?
Bridge, you're running the show. You got to tell us who's talking.
No, I don't want to.
That's what a moderator does, my darling.
Bridge, we're going to talk over each other if you don't tell us when to talk.
Okay, fine. The teacher's just picking people at random. You'll go next. What does accessibility mean to you? No, Mischa.
Oh,
Does that mean?
Yes.
Accessibility, I mean, it's in the word. It's the ability to access. If you have trouble accessing podcasting for, yes, being hard of hearing, if you have vision problems that also keeps you from reading transcripts, if you have societal issues that keep you from accessing the internet, if you have all manner of reasons could keep you from accessing a medium of storytelling. And as storytellers, we probably want to reach as many people as possible. So it's pretty important that we get the stories to the people who need them.
I'll just add to that really quickly. I don't have a ton to add other than what Erin and Mischa said, but it's always striking to me when this becomes an issue with people not wanting to make their story more accessible, because I don't know why you wouldn't want to. I don't know why you wouldn't want to. I know it takes some work. Yeah, why you wouldn't want to like get it out there for a larger audience? Like it's kind of self-serving.
The answer to that, Jeff, is because it's work. It takes a lot of work, and yes, you have to commit to doing that work. And yes, when you're starting a project, you should build in that work into like what you expect to be doing. But I do get the pushback from people who, for example, say a podcast starts and has 50 episodes before they realize they should be better at accessibility. Right. And now they have a backlog of 50 episodes they have to transcribe in addition to doing one every week. I understand that that's a mountain of work, and I understand why there might be pushback. It sucks. You should have been more accessible from the beginning, but there's a reason. Right.
But there's also goodwill, I think, that comes with efforts to. So if you're 50 episodes in and you do your first transcript, for example, or you start giving content warnings, and then you say, we've got a mountain of work to do. We're going to get to it, but we want to start fresh. We want to do the right thing going forward. Then at least you're putting. I think people will say, okay, they have an issue. They're going to get to it, and they're working on it, and we're going to give them a grace period. But maybe that's not true. But I think that if you start doing the right thing, eventually you'll get caught up, and people will be forgiving. But also, you should be doing it from the beginning. I agree.
And then we lost Eli there for a minute. Eli's the next on the speaking block.
And I just managed to get my connection back. I think for me, accessibility is definitely equity. There's a difference for me between, say, equality of access and equity. It's like there was a comic I've seen. I know probably quite a few people have seen, where like you have the three guys watching the football, soccer, and then they each end up on different sized. It's just leveling the playing field. Everyone can participate in some form, in the form of media that they choose or that they enjoy.
All right, those were some great answers. I don't know if I should answer the question, but I'm kind of in favor of let's move on, because there's been sort of a hot topic on transcripts lately, with Luminary missing the point every time they're asked about.
Hey, I guess I should say with full disclosure that I'm working on the AM archives, which is a Luminary production.
All right.
Yeah.
Before we start talking about Luminary, I guess I should say I work for them. They sign my paycheck.
We'll direct all our complaints directly to you, Mischa.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, I mean, if we're talking about accessibility and we're talking about exclusivity of platforms, I mean, yeah, there's a large issue of accessibility surrounding class and surrounding affordability. Is that what we're talking about? Are we talking about affordability as accessibility?
I mean,
I mean, it's a factor, right? Like,
you just brought up a really great idea, so let's run.
Okay. Yeah, not everything's affordable. Not everything is accessible because some people can't afford it. In addition, a lot of other accessibility needs require funds that could be otherwise diverted to entertainment expenditures. Some people can't afford $8 a month to pay for Luminary because they have to pay medical bills every month, et cetera, et cetera. Is that fair? No. Is life fair? Not really. Eat the rich.
hell yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I just also like, but it's also an interesting factor that I'd like to bring up, and this isn't a counterpoint at any sense. I agree. Let's eat the rich. But like, I mean, you know, when Mischa is like, "Oh, I work for Luminary," I'm just like, "Hell yeah, go get that money!" Like, you know.
Yeah. My issue, it's not the creators who are working for them. I'm completely, fully supporting them because I think it's fantastic that people are getting recognized and paid for their hard work. At the same time, I think when they're being confronted with questions about things like transcripts and they don't even really have a sense of why they're important, that's yes, thank you for doing that. Exactly. I've been loving those tweets. And and it's surprising that they haven't anticipated that this would be an issue, to me at least.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not trying to say that you know, we should be okay with it. My point is more.
No, I didn't get that impression at all.
You know, Mischa is a disabled person working for them, and hiring disabled people is actually also an important part of making any industry accessible.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Like for me, the real sticking point with them, like Luminary, was that they sent them, which was just asking them how they plan to allow transcripts on the subscription service. The reply I got was that they're still exploring it,
which is unacceptable.
Well, is it unacceptable because it's a new platform and they didn't think about it? Because old platforms don't have that either. Stitcher Premium doesn't have transcripts.
True.
Like Wondery doesn't really provide a ton of, like, the big networks. That's not the norm. It should be, but it's not. So I wonder if it's unreasonable to focus all the rage at one company just because they're the newest one.
That's a fair point. Like, yeah, I definitely think the reason Luminary is getting all the heat right now is because they're the new kid on the block. Because these discussions we've already tried having with a lot of the other ones, and they just fall on like complete silence. So yeah, like there is almost certainly a certain degree of unfair focus on Luminary compared to everyone else at the moment, for sure.
I'm not trying to say that they don't deserve scrutiny just because they're the newest one, but like I agree that premium platforms not providing transcripts is a huge problem. Let's just say that like I was recently in the negotiations with one of these big companies about an exclusivity window, and this is a thing that these big platforms really want from existing indie podcasters. Is like, hey, you already have a popular show. Take it off the free air, put it on our platform for 6 months, and that'll drive content towards our platform. And one of the things we've been negotiating about is like, well, if you want to take, you know, Ars Paradoxica Season 1 off of iTunes, and we're not allowed to provide it for free for 6 months, you need a place to put our transcripts that we also provide alongside. And they didn't have the infrastructure in place to even support that. So we turned it down. In fact, that was one of the big reasons we turned it down.
The infrastructure, what does that even look like? Isn't it just like a website? Doesn't it already?
Because all of these platforms are proprietary, right? So they all have to own everything about them. So how they present their transcripts, what each website looks like, how the app works, how clicking through from the podcast to the transcript, that all needs to be programmed on like proprietarily, and they don't.
Gotcha. Wow.
Yeah. I don't know where I dropped off in my little talk about Netflix.
Oh, I didn't even hear Netflix.
Yeah, we didn't even get to that.
Okay, well, I was saying that like Netflix had to be taken to court before they even to get them to put transcripts on their subtitles on their content. So I've seen a couple of people raising that point that some of the these platforms might end up getting taken to court at some point, which
the problem with that is there has to be someone willing to take them to court, which there is not always.
Yeah, I mean, who took Netflix to court? We could just ask. Can we call them? Can we? Who are they? Can I get their number? Like, yeah, I don't know. It's because podcasting is so small. It's growing every day, but like the amount of people who are being successful in it isn't growing at the same rate, really. Netflix has all TV watchers behind it. Or like a suit against Netflix has a drastically larger portion of the population behind a class action suit, at least in America. I don't know how laws work. I barely know how laws work in America. I don't really know how they work in other countries. But, because so many more people watch TV and then by extension Netflix, as cool as we think we are, like my mom still doesn't really know what a podcast is. Oh, and I make like 80. So with that, it's hard to get the momentum. It's hard to get the traction, unless we get someone who's very liberal and wants to help us fight it and has a lot of money or a lot of clout. Does anybody know any billionaires that are cool? Does anybody know any cool billionaires?
I
wish. I think, like we said before.
It was the National Association for the Deaf that filed an ADA lawsuit against Netflix.
Cool.
So
maybe we could call them to sue Luminary, Spotify, Stitcher Premium, and all the other platforms. Hey, Stitcher Premium and Luminary, keep signing my paychecks.
I suppose I wonder a big thing I've heard against like transcripts or subtitles is, and we touched on this earlier, is if you've already started and you've got the 50 episode backlog, then maybe the creator doesn't have the time to do the transcripts, because some transcripts are very technical while others are just almost word for word the script with maybe adding in the sound effects. And there are some creators who not to like call her out, but Reagan Adler, who's a really wonderful person, she doesn't have the time or energy to make transcripts for her podcast. So what would you suggest for creators who can't?
Am I speaking? I'll say first.
You can go first, yeah.
Great. So this is part of what a large block of advice for new podcasters that is given out by my friends over at Multitude, which is a podcast collective that do really good work in consulting with the community. And one of the things they say is that, like, when you're starting out, plan that in. Don't assume you're not going to have to do it, and then plan your work. Including it. If you get, if you're making a podcast and you're in the middle of making your first season, and you say it's just too much work to do it, well, like, you're in your first season. Change your release schedule. Change change your production, needs. Don't release the episodes until the transcripts and the episodes are both complete. That's a strategy. There are ways to get around them being work. I know the pressure to get shows out as quickly as possible is very, very severe, but if you're committed to accessibility, wait.
Yeah, like that's a lot of what I was going to say too, is like accessibility needs to be built into the workflow from the beginning. In the situation where you can't do that, and it's always, but it's so much extra time or money, because that is something we hear a lot. And my point is, well, so is making a podcast. Like, making a good podcast, you have to pay for your microphone, you have to pay for your DAW, you have to spend time editing audio. You are spending time and money on a podcast anyway. So to go, I can't spend that on accessibility, sends a message that you don't think that 20% of the world is worth doing that work and spending that money for. I understand that backlogs are hard, but I don't think that there's a real reason not to do them. If you're already producing content, you build it into your new stuff, and your old stuff, work on it when you can. As Jeff said earlier, if you say, look, we're going to start releasing transcripts now, sorry we haven't done it till now, and we're going to slowly work on our backlog, people will be fine with that.
Yeah. I think, to take a good example, I reached out to Paul Bay, who runs the Big Loop.
Yeah.
Paul Bay.
Big Loop. Yeah. Okay. And so at the beginning, his transcripts for the Big Loop were only on Patreon. And I kind of reached out and I explained the problem, and he went, okay, once we've completed first season, I'm going to go back, find a way to put these all out, and it will be taken into consideration for our next season. We will do that. And I think, especially if you're coming up to a season break or a hiatus, that's maybe a good time to try and get that backlog caught up, or sorry.
No, you're good. Jeff, did you have something you wanted to add?
I agree that I think it's important that we establish that this is something that people should be doing from the beginning. And I really like Erin's point about it. It's just part of making a podcast. I think it should be. And I think it's up to a lot of people, anybody who's currently doing it, to get that word out there, so that, like Multitude, for example, they're just saying this is you have to plan this in, you have to budget your time to include this, because if you're not doing it, then you're not accessible, and that's a problem. And it's, in a way, it's a shame that it falls to sort of indie creators who don't have a lot of time and resources to be the people that need to sort of spread the word and do what we're doing here, for example. But that's the only way anything is going to change, is if we underline why and how it's so important, I think.
Oh my.
I realized computer just took off.
Oh, is it making... Can you guys hear it?
Yeah.
It does make a lot of noise. Yeah, it does that. Like what Jeff was saying about it mostly being indie podcast creators. Oh boy. That is something that I have seen, in creating my list of podcasts. It is a lot of small podcasts, newly started ones that don't have a big budget, that are releasing transcripts as just going, and we will have transcripts from the beginning, and it's really refreshing to see.
All right. So, any other words on transcripts before we move on?
There are services that folks can use too.
Yeah, let's give some tools.
Yes.
Yeah,
because,
tools.
And some of them cost money, which sucks. And, if you're willing to pay, then you probably get more for your money. But there are some free services as well. They still take work because it's just going to listen to your show and do its best, and it's not going to get it 100% right. There's just no way. So you're going to have to go through and make corrections. But that's better than, that gives you a baseline if you don't have a script. For example, if you're a podcaster that doesn't start with a script, the script gives you a nice baseline, but not everybody has that.
I'm going to say, though, that the computer ones, they are only going to work for Americans. They do not work on Australian accents. I have no idea what they do on other accents, but I'm guessing if they can't do Australian, they're not very good at other accents either.
Probably not.
I tried a couple. I think Otter AI was one that was recommended. Apparently that works really well for American accents.
That's the one I was going to mention. Yeah, sorry, Erin.
Well, no, like, this is very valuable. If you have a cast with American accents, this is very valuable. But I put in one of our scripts just to see how it handled the accent, and it didn't. It was just gibberish. So yeah, computer generated transcripts can be a good starting point if you have American accents.
Are we about to move away from transcripts? I have one last thing to say before we move away from transcripts.
All right.
Just that, like, yeah, they're a lot of work, but if you haven't done them, you haven't finished making your podcast yet.
Yes.
Also, absolutely don't put them behind a paywall as a exclusive.
No.
I still see people doing that. I see people I respect doing that. Yeah,
what a cool disability tax on your show.
Oh, it's terrible. It's the worst.
So 14 podcasts paywalled in the list. 13 creators. $72. $72 if you want to access them all. That's an average of $5 per podcast. Sorry, I've been buying stuff today.
What makes me really angry about that is that your podcast is free to listen to. So why the hell is your transcript not free?
And there are a surprising number of folks who I think otherwise are, value accessibility. Yes. And I notice every once in a while a creator on Patreon will do that, and I'll be like, and here's actually a good question if Bridget's okay with me putting this up. Is it our responsibility to see, when people do this, to reach out and say, hey, you should really rethink this, because this is really not a good thing to do.
It worked with Paul, like I said.
I've also had it not work in the past.
Yeah, that is my concern. Like, I have seen, like, in passing on Twitter, some people go, it's too much work, and since I'm putting hours into this, I should get paid.
You're putting hours into making your podcast.
Well, I've also. How about this one? I once spoke to a creator and I said, hey, your transcript should be free. And they said, I have a right to make money when I publish it as a book.
Wow.
So I'm not gonna release it. You have to buy my book.
And like, so I don't name and shame publicly, but when I did like my little thread on how much accessing the paywall transcripts was cost, I was really kind of upset by some of the people who were on that list, because for me, I'm like, these are podcasts that I love. They're otherwise amazing. And yeah, it's one of those things that you never know whether I never know when I can reach out or not, because that I have had like some bad stuff asking for accommodations in the past.
I think this is one of those times where we need able people to stand up.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask next.
A lot of work for us to put in this effort. So if you are an abled person listening or watching this roundtable, hassle people who put their transcripts behind paywalls. Ask them why they do it. Tell them that they shouldn't. Because if one person does it, it's not just like a disabled versus able thing. The more people who tell someone that, the more likely they are to listen.
Yeah. And if you'd like to know some people, just take a look at the list. I'm not naming and shaming explicitly.
Where can that list be found? Where can I find that list?
It is in the pinned tweet at accessthepod. It is probably near the bottom because I do not organize my threads well.
I will put that, and I'll probably put it in the description of the video.
Cool.
I have a couple more things on transcripts before we move on, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So we only covered like Otter AI for stuff. For transcripts, if you an affordable solution is rev.com, rev.com. That's human transcription. It costs $1 a minute of audio, which is extremely cheap. So that is a good place to look if you aren't able to do transcripts yourselves. Also, and this is just petty, but whenever I hear the whole transcripts take a lot of work or that's extra time or money, like my currently running podcast does captions as well as transcripts. Like transcripts take basically no time in comparison to captions, and I still manage to fit captions for a 50-episode season into a year production cycle. Like, this idea that transcriptions are too much work, I feel like it's not coming from a place of good faith. Like, if you actually give a shit, wait, am I allowed to swear? Sorry. If you actually give a damn, like it is not an insurmountable amount of work to add to your production. Like, even, and the thing is like, there are a lot of people with disabilities who would struggle to get transcripts out. They are consistently the ones I see doing the extra work, even when it is harder for them. So I just, yeah, like the whole it's so much extra work, I'm like, I find that very sus.
Yeah.
This is brings me to, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Eli.
If you have a little more money to throw around, there are quite a few people offering transcription services. I know I've had there are some people who have offered their transcribing services in replies to my tweets, which is an interesting place to put that, but I will retweet them onto my account. And yeah, like I know some of my disabled friends who like transcribing. It's easy for them because they can stay at home. It lets them stay at home and transcribe. So gives them money back to the disabled community. But yes, Jeff. Yeah,
I was just going to bring up a failure of mine recently that I discovered, being very kind of abled and privileged. I make short little advertisements for our episodes that I release on social media. And I think Headliner is the app that I use to make them. And it comes with a free captioning service that's pretty good. It's not perfect. Again, you have to go up and clean it up. And for the first like 4 of them, I didn't use it. I didn't even think to use it. I was just like, oh, I don't want that because I want people to focus on the image and focus on the sound. And then it dawned on me, like, you idiot, you are alienating people. I mean, first of all, nobody listens to advertisements anyway. Like, you should just caption them. Nobody wants, it's the internet. You just want to scroll and read, and that's it. Like, you should just plan on that because, you know, most people have to plug in their headphones and that takes work or whatever. But also, it's just like, why wouldn't you do that? Like, if it's doing most of the work for you. And yeah, there's a little bit of cleanup, but you're also making, you know, now the advertisements for your show more accessible. It's just, I was embarrassed that I had just defaulted to not doing it.
Sorry.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I actually find it really interesting how uncommon captions are in podcasting. Because, like, as I said, I come from disability arts background, so captions were built into our workflow from the beginning, before I even really had noticed that other podcasts don't do them. And I find it really interesting, and I don't know why it is, because to me, captions, for starters, captions serve a different audience to transcripts. Like, there are a lot of people who find captions easier than transcripts. And also, like, by putting your captioned video up on YouTube, like a good 20% of our audience is our YouTube watchers. So it's like, or it might be less than that now because we had a huge swoop recently. It might only be like 10% now. But like, it's interesting to me. I'd be curious as to the rest of the panel's thoughts on why captions aren't more common in podcasting.
That's a really good question. I don't know if I know the difference. I don't. What do you mean by captions? You mean like as it's playing live?
Yes.
Oh, where do you put those?
On YouTube.
YouTube.
Oh, well, I mean, for me, for the Whisper Forge doesn't release on YouTube. We don't like that platform.
Oh, that's fair.
We don't release on a platform that has caption capabilities. I think if we did, we would probably go for it. The platforms that are currently popular for podcasts, besides YouTube, which like I have a really, I've never liked YouTube. I've never been on YouTube. I have a bunch of friends who are really into YouTube. My fiance loves YouTube. I never got into it, so I don't interact with that platform. And all the other traditional podcast platforms don't have captioning support. I think I haven't even heard of it. If I had heard of it, I would demand it in more platforms. And if the platforms had them, I would do them. That's a really, I think it's that, like, I didn't even think to ask.
Yeah. There's a company here in Australia, I think called Accessability, that have a captioning service that's just for audio that doesn't require video as well. I don't know what that would cost for a podcaster because they're mostly aimed at like big corporations. But I can look into that if people want to know about that as well.
That would be cool. But I also think that like that service is great. And but the whole point of accessibility is that it creates parity, it creates equity. It means that everyone can access it in like similar, in like to a similar level. And those apps are never going to have the market saturation that Spotify does.
Yeah.
My small problem with, I'd say, captions is that from what I've seen from some podcasts on YouTube, creators leave their transcript, their captions open to public editing, and that opens a whole can of worms. I've also
on one
seen.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, and I've also seen like some creators of big time podcasts just go, please caption our podcast for us. And I am very uncomfortable with that as a concept, because I think it's good that some people are like, yeah, I can do this. It's cool. I don't mind doing it for free. But also, I do feel it should be the responsibility. I think it's like fan transcripts. They're a good thing because it means that it is accessible in some way. But also, it really shouldn't be up to the fans to do it.
It shouldn't. I'm glad that the option exists that, like, if you're not going to do it, we can do it for ourselves. I don't like how that opens up potentially nice content to trolls.
Yep.
Yeah. And it's come up sometimes in outside of my podcast community, outside of the podcast community, in my like wider disabled group, that a lot of people have come across YouTube videos with just funny comments in the captions.
Yeah, I've had that problem.
Not related to what the audio is at all. And I think, I don't know how like endemic that is, but it's probably quite high.
Yeah, we don't allow public editing of our captions, but we do allow. No one's done it, but we do allow translation captions because we're like crappy monolingual people. But yeah, I do think I agree. I think it's the responsibility of the creator to at least put, if it's said in the video, if there is a sound in the video, it should be in the captions. You know, like we always say with transcription, like if you want your audience to hear it, you should be writing it in the transcript. Yeah, that's really interesting. Thank you for humoring me on that, everyone.
Are we good with transcripts?
I think so. I think we put that one in the ground.
Okay, so I had a great bouncing off point like a couple talking points ago, but it got lost in all the good transcript discussion. So let's sort of attempt a smooth segue into creating while disabled. I know.
It hard.
Yeah, I mean, I'll take this opportunity to talk about a fun thing that's happening this year. So this year, I've been creating season 2 of a show called The Far Meridian, which is a nice little intimate show.
It's very good.
It's amazing.
This season, at the end of spoilers for season 1. Spoilers for season 1 of The Far Meridian right now. Them in 3, 2, 1. Okay, so The Far Meridian season 1 ends with Perry, with the main character Perry breaking her leg, and throughout the first half of season 2, she's supposed to be on crutches and on using a cane and recovering, and you know it sort of takes a while. And one thing I found about creating a show, being the sound designer of a show while disabled, is that none of my 600 gigabyte sound effect libraries had the sounds of footsteps with a cane. Not a single one. I couldn't find them. I had to make every single one myself. And
Wow.
like, that's fine. I'm a producer on that show. I designed that show mostly out of sound libraries. But then I worked on another show where a main character is permanently, and it's written into the script from day one that it was written that like she has crutches all the time. And when I received the sound effect files from the producer that I was working with, they didn't have cane sounds. I was like, hey, I need these cane sounds to make this character what you asked us to do. It took me about until 5 days before my due date to get those files because they hadn't thought of them. And I'm like, how did you not think of them? 1, it's in every script. 2, like you made every other sound. How did you miss this one? How was that not obvious? And it really made me mad.
Yeah.
I don't know. That was the end of my story. It just really pissed me off.
I mean, I think that's very like that's part of the problem though, is that we're invisible. Like disability is invisible, you know?
Yeah, but like it sucks that even in the invisible medium.
Yeah, right.
Or also that when someone tries to...
Oh, sorry, Jeff.
I'm sorry. I was just going to quickly say that when someone makes an attempt to have, like, you know, representation, they completely miss the mark by not going 100% there. Like, here's a character, but we didn't do any of the sound. Sorry. Good luck with that. Like, I'm just going to leave it to you. Well,
it's funny. I tweeted something yesterday about how many characters in audio fiction like pour drinks but then never drink them.
Listen, I've got some people drinking drinks. I saw that and I was like, Mischa, I did that.
I understand. I am one of the we are one of the biggest offenders. The Far Meridian is such a small little intimate show, and they always want to be drinking cups of tea in their big purple sweaters, but then they don't drink the tea, and it bothers me so much in my own show. But like that's one thing when you pour a drink and then don't drink it, that's like innocent. When you have characters that are disabled and you don't have sound effects for your show, that's a problem. Yeah. You know, it's the same lapse of planning, but it has a huger, like a way bigger consequence, and that's important.
Yeah. And then I don't know if I've just dropped.
No, you're here.
No,
okay, cool. Sorry. Everything.
Oh, did you lose Eli?
I was going to say, and then there's some disabilities that are just very, very hard to represent in audio. I you can put in lines about it. And yeah, because I have like my chronic pain, it does affect my life. Sometimes I use a cane, but I don't often talk about it outside of like my friends because I've received so much derision from my peers for it. Geology courses suck for disabled people, but yeah.
Well,
So
I also think it's interesting that our talk about transcripts was so centered on people who are hard of hearing. How do you put a deaf person in a piece of audio fiction? They can't talk. What do you do? I'm literally asking. I have an episode of the AM archive with a deaf character coming up. I have no idea what I'm going to do.
I mean, if you so do you mean like someone who's nonverbal?
Yes.
Okay. Most nonverbal people I know still make sounds. They just don't talk.
Okay. All right.
I'd say from like when I go nonverbal, I still make like little squeaky noise. I very much fall back on echolalia, which is repeating sounds and phrases. So it's not necessarily nonverbal, but semi-verbal. But it'll be things like little squeaks, hums. I can still hum to myself. I still kind of sing, but without words. I'd say maybe if they use sign language, you could have hand sound effects.
What do hands sound like? Go ahead, tell me. What is the sound of one hand clapping? I'm interested to know.
I think maybe a little more practically than that. If someone is nonverbal, their options are usually signing or assisted communication. If it's assisted communication, then that sounds like assisted communication. If it's signing, then it's very common for people to have interpreters if they're somewhere where other people don't sign. Even if that interpreter isn't like an actual support worker, they might just be a friend. So I think it's like very reasonable to have someone interpreting for them, or have them use an ACC device.
All right. So the question that gets people out of this easily is how, like, I'm not saying this is a good question. I'm not saying we should answer it because it's a bad question that should be rejected out of hand. But the excuse that gets used is, well, I was in the middle of a scene and I was telling a story and now I have to be about that. Now I have to divert my story to explain why this is happening.
Oh, okay. I see what you mean.
You see what I mean? Like, it's shitty because, like, okay, well, we have to divert our lives to explain it to normal people. So yeah, but that's the excuse that gets tossed around. And in storytelling circles, like the independent audio drama community, and for aspiring students of storytelling, they're always told, like, get rid of the chaff, kill your babies, the line is not worth a scene. And like, without diving deeper into why, cutting a bit where someone signs and takes 5 seconds and then an interpreter repeats what they have to say seems like there's some chaff there that could be cut. I'm not saying, again, don't do it. There's a better reason to keep it in. But if you're going purely by kill your darlings, a line is not worth a scene, etc., that's a place to do it. And that's an excuse that you shouldn't fall into.
Yeah, agreed. I also think the whole idea behind kill your darlings, and if you can cut it, because I'm a very cut happy like editor, but the whole point behind that is to distill the piece down to what it really needs to be. And if someone needs to have an interpreter or something like that, that needs to be there. You know, there's an idea that, yeah, we can cut that, but that's not true. You can't actually cut it, because if you cut it, nothing else is going to make sense. So yeah, I understand. I've also heard that kind of thing. It does come from this idea of like, oh, but, you know, we'll ruin the flow. No, you won't ruin the flow. How bad of a writer are you that can ruin your flow? Like, you can work with that. Like, if you're a writer, if you're a creator, you're a creative person, you are a good problem solver. You can find a way around it.
Yeah.
And Jeff, did you have something you wanted to say?
Just that I think Kill Your Darlings is a little bit bullshit in general anyway. And I like, one of the reasons I like audio drama is because it allows you to push against that idea a little bit. And maybe the better thing to say is to examine what real darlings are and what should be cut and what should not be, and what's considered a darling and what's considered something that's essential to be there for any number of reasons. And I agree with Erin. Like, if you're good at what you're doing as a storyteller, you should be able to find workarounds and make it work, especially if it's something that's going to add coherency and accessibility representation to a piece of art.
So might it be valid to say similarly to, sorry, I don't have my teeth in. Similarly to, if you haven't written your transcripts, you haven't finished making your podcast yet. If disabled people in your show breaks the flow of your show, you haven't finished writing it yet.
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
Well said.
Yeah, the excuse of like it's too much work or it breaks up the flow, they're really just excuses, and they're not very good ones. In my opinion, I think it just kind of lays bare how little people think or care, and it's not good.
Yeah.
All right, and we're sort of coming up on the end of the hour, so let's get some final thoughts on this in, and then I have one more question I want to ask.
So, okay, to go back to the original, because I think you originally asked us about creating while disabled. That is actually really interesting for me, because in Australia, most arts things that go ahead are funded by the government. There's not a very strong independent arts, like as in independently funded arts scene in Australia. And that's incredibly inaccessible. Grants are not accessible, particularly for me. I have a very set amount of energy and brain that I can spend. And if I spent my time on grants, I wouldn't make the thing I need the grants for. So like, that's been one of...
Can I ask Erin, that almost seemingly implies, like, we could use arguments that we've brought up in this panel against that. The government could say, well, if you don't have time to write the grant, you haven't finished producing the thing yet. You know, like it's the same excuse for not doing transcripts, but the other way around. So I wonder how. I mean, it's different because it's state owned and like power dynamics are different, basically. But that's an interesting thing. You know what I mean? I'm not. Yeah, I do think what makes it different, as I was talking, I convinced myself of it, is like the difference in power dynamic there.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, yeah, no, now you can keep talking. I'm done.
No, that's all right. And I understand that this is a very foreign idea to Americans. Like, from what I hear, your art scene
government
is
funded arts. What is that? I don't know her.
Trust me, it is not better. Like, it is not better. The art scene here is like constant. Like, the starving artist thing is still a thing. And yeah, like it's. So like that, getting funding alone is an inaccessible act here. Like we fund our podcasts out of pocket. We ran a Kickstarter for season 2 of Love and Luck, and we have a Patreon now, but those just offset our costs a little bit. And like, we would not be able to make anything if my partner didn't have a job at a bank. So that has actually been the hardest thing. And even in the like theater and disability theater troupe I'm in, funding has been our biggest problem there as well. Like, no one wants to give us money. And when they do, they're only going to give us a little bit of money so that they can write, we supported a disabled troupe on their like, website. I'm disabled, so like everything that comes up for one of my team is like kind of fine for me to deal with. Like if it's, I can't guarantee I'll be available my day, I'll be like, that's cool, I understand. If it's, I can't do stairs, I'm like, that's cool, our recording studio is in an accessible building. Like, yeah, it's I feel like it's probably funnily enough, I feel like including disabled people in production is harder for abled people because it's not already a part of their life.
Yeah,
Whereas for
I
me,
definitely agree with that.
Yeah.
I think that because we're already making accommodations for ourselves in our own lives, it is easier for us to accommodate others when issues come up. In a way that again, able people just don't think about. They have I'm going to say it. Ready, get the sirens ready. It's their privilege not to think about it. And now
Speaking
I go
of
to
people,
jail.
what is the best way, and I'm sorry I'm speaking out of a place of ignorance and privilege, but what is the best way for someone like me to sort of learn about what I can be doing better to think about these things?
Listen.
Make friends with disabled people.
Yeah, and listen.
Yeah, like Jeff, text me. Like what?
Yeah, I'm like, Jeff, I love you. What are you talking about? DM me.
Yeah.
Right.
When I talk all the time.
I just don't want it to be a burden, and maybe it's not, but it's part of me thinks that it's something I should just be doing on my own, because I don't want to leave it to you to sort of correct me. Does that make sense?
That's fair. I think, and maybe this is just me, so other people on the panel can chime in whenever. But like that, I have volunteered in this community. Like, we're all on this panel to speak out about issues. We have volunteered to be the advocates, like, that are willing to help people learn. And then once you learn those things, like, the best thing you can do is then go tell your friends.
On that knowledge. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, like we are here. We specifically people who have volunteered. Do not ask people without consent if they're willing to consult, or at least like maybe you should pay them. But if people have volunteered this information, ask the volunteers and then turn around and give it to people who don't know.
Right. And I'll also say there's a way to ask people in a way that respects their time. Like, if you're just like, hey, what do I do to make this accessible? And you just then get annoyed if I don't reply in a day, that's not very good. But like, if you say, hey, Erin, I need some advice on this particular thing, can you help me out? Can we maybe arrange a time to talk about it? Or you can email me. And then I reply and I'm like, sure, let's make a time to talk or something. Like, that's a very respectful exchange. Like, just like, you can ask people for freebies. Like, I know we try to discourage that, but I think that it's okay to ask as long as you're respectful of their time and their effort.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And this is why I feel it's important to have people on all sides of the different discussions on a panel, because then we get good discussion like that.
You got one last question, Bridge?
Well, it kind of got covered with Jeff's question, and it was actually something that Lizette asked in the YouTube chat. When was the time that you felt not only I misread the question. Her question is, when was the time that you felt not only given access but welcomed? I read it as, when was the time you felt you weren't given access or welcomed? Two very different questions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lizette. I'm 22 and I never learned how to fucking read.
When was the time when we felt like we were given access?
Yeah.
In podcasting specifically?
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
I have a reply, and Erin, it was Listen to Love and Luck. Like, I know I tweeted to you guys about it from my non-podcasting Twitter about how.
Oh, we lost Eli.
Oh no. That sounded like really nice.
Come back.
No.
I guess I have a really depressing answer.
Yeah.
Which is that I don't, in podcasting specifically, I haven't.
Yeah, I agree. I super duper agree with that. I've had to like tooth and claw fight for every bit of content I've been given, for access to things. I've had fights with so many podcasters about free transcripts. I've had fights with people about mono versus stereo. I've had fights with people about audio quality, clarity, and like 1,000 things that feed into accessibility. I got into podcasting because I had to leave a previous profession for accessibility issues. I was a theater technician, and you can't do that if you're not able-bodied.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
You cannot make a living. And like I would, all my relatives would be like, "Well, you're such a good sound designer. Do you really have to do 10 years of grunt work?" Yeah, you kind of do.
Yeah.
And it sucks because I really love live theater so much. A part of what I do in podcasting is trying to recreate the feeling of live theater in an industry because I had to abandon it. And that things are so much different in the post-production and publishing worlds. Like, I feel like I'm clawing for every little bit I get.
Yeah.
Eli's back. Eli, say your nice thing.
Hello.
When you cut out, you were gonna say some real nice shit about Erin and Love and Luck.
Oh yeah. I was saying I tweeted to Erin from to the Love and Luck account from my non-podcast account about how the audio was so clear and really easy for me to listen to, and like it was just very refreshing for me to be able to like not have to pause and like use that little rewind button to actually be able to hear what was said the first time and like understand it. It was so lovely.
That makes me so happy because like, yeah, like mixing for accessibility is like also a really important thing that Mischa touched on just before as well. Like, like I will sacrifice realism all the time for better, clear sound. Like, we like, yeah, like the stereo versus mono thing is also really important. Like while we're here, abled people like watching or listening, please don't export in stereo unless like ambisonics is vital to your show. Like, we go on.
Nothing. I've been told actually that like you can have stereo sound as long as you like the extremes are 50%, not 100%. Is that true? Do you think?
Based off my friends with one-sided hearing loss that can't do a lot of those shows, yeah, I don't think that's true.
Okay.
I think that if you want to have stereo, I actually think a really good solution is to export two episodes and export one in stereo and one in mono. Because
but then now we're back to platforms don't support that.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, you could just do two in your feed, like, and just have them listed differently, which I know is a workaround, but it is a workaround. Yeah, like stereo is a rough thing, like, and normally like stereo issues might affect, actually no, I was about to say it might affect less people, but it doesn't, because it's not just people with hearing loss. Like people with sensory issues can feel really uncomfortable or overwhelmed with stereo.
Yes, so much. I had someone place a very, very high-pitched screech in my left ear, which is my more sensitive ear to high-pitched noises. And I threw my headphones across my bedroom. Luckily, they landed on my bed, and proceeded to have a meltdown, which was a productive use of an afternoon. Sarcasm, yay. So yeah, I will say that sometimes sounds just coming from one side can actually make the sound more intense.
Which is like, I think often what people are going for, they just don't think of the ramifications of that for everyone.
Ooh, yeah.
Also, before we move on, sorry, I am sorry, I'm that person. But I just realized we have not really touched on any mental health stuff in this panel so far. And just if I can impart one thing, if you make a show that blurs the lines between fiction and reality, that's fine, but make it clear that it's still fiction. Like, and you can do that in a bunch of ways, but please, please, please stop sending people into mental health breakdowns.
Oh, yes. That has also happened to me.
Yeah.
And trigger warnings. Please trigger warnings. Just, yeah.
Yeah, we actually, this is still a thing I'm definitely working on. I consider myself a fairly jaded person, so I've been slow to come around to like exactly what does and does not need trigger warnings. I'm learning to err on the side of everything.
Yeah.
One thing I am really proud of is the newest show. The Whisper Forge just put out, Caravan, has like a full 30-second long content warning that is like copy pasted to every episode. That was everything we could think of and covers, I would say, a pretty wide gamut of things. And we just put it in front of every episode as part of the theme song, and we just like
it works.
And it's in every episode.
What I really like about what you did was you kind of wrap it into the story almost. And there's just a line where you say it's mighty dangerous in the canyon, and I don't know. I just think that just adds to the show. Like it's just a nice.
That's Toe. Toe is so good at like using the genre to say things that they want to say. Oh, it's very good. I love that.
Yeah,
I love working on that.
And I actually think I'm really glad you brought that up, because that is a really good example of how this stuff doesn't have to be like dry and lifeless. Like,
right.
It's fine if it is. Like our content warnings are very sincere. We just have Rosalind say like, this episode contains these things. Please take care of yourself. But like, you can camp up a content note. Like, it's totally fine. Like, as long as yeah, go on.
I was just gonna say we had an Ayn Rand content warning once because you know.
Look, that's fair. That's fair.
Well, right. It's an actual legitimate thing. Like, I don't want to know.
Yeah.
But look, can I quickly ask how do you all feel about? So we do content warnings. We don't have a very intense show, but we do them in the show notes. Do you think it's important to just do them up front in the audio, like Caravan does now, like Love and Luck does?
For me, I think I've said in the past, you can on my Twitter that if you're going to put them in the show notes,
make it clear that that's where they are.
This podcast has content that some people may need to. I cannot remember phrasing, but say that there are trigger warnings and that there is a list in the show notes, and give people enough space to be able to pause and go to the show notes afterwards.
Right. That makes sense. We should start doing that, I think.
At
the very least.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think if you're not going to include the content warnings in the audio, you should include that there are content warnings and exactly where to find them in the audio.
Right.
And that can sometimes be better if you make some kind of like really like scary horror show. The content warnings might be a page long. Like, you might not want to put that all in audio. So I think it can actually be a very good compromise.
I also think a lot of the argument, or I shouldn't say a lot. Some of the argument against content warnings in audio is that it spoils some of the content. You know, if you know that there's a gunshot coming, you're gonna not be as surprised when the gunshot comes. So I think that saying, hey, there are trigger warnings, you should check the show notes before you start this piece of audio, allows people to avoid spoiling without ignoring the need for them.
Yes.
Dining in the Void managed to pull that off very, very well in their season finale. They did have a gunshot, and they were like, there is a loud noise at this audio stamp. If you need more information, go to the show notes, and it's right at the bottom, because we don't want people to accidentally see it when they bring up the show notes. I think I'd almost say putting the content warnings in the show notes is better than giving a blanket warning for the whole series. Listen to a podcast where they just had the same content warnings for every single episode, but those were not present in every single episode. And the thing is, for me, if I know there's going to be certain content in an episode that may trigger me, I do need to kind of amp myself up or kind of protect myself from that. So
Yeah.
having that at the beginning of every single episode means that I'm not sure what is relevant to that episode and what precautions I need to take.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up as well, because like I have very specific PTSD triggers that generally don't, like, it's not a problem. But yeah, if it's there, it's gonna be there. But yeah, like I listen to some podcasts that I love that just play the same rote. Also, while we're on this, don't make your only content warning, because this is another problem that's related. Don't make a content warning. This podcast contains material that may be distressing to some viewers, and then no other information.
Yeah.
Because that's
Pretty
not
anxiety
helpful.
inducing. Yeah. Just wondering what it is the whole time, where it's coming. Sure.
So yeah, do like be specific and do. And yeah, the show notes are a good place for this, like, especially like because as I said, I really like the caravan style, like, of making it a part of it, like, for sure. But yeah, like, I think having it in show notes as well is like really good. It's really good, and you have to write those damn things anyway.
If you haven't put your content warnings in your transcripts and your show notes, have you really done them yet?
Exactly.
Everything should be everywhere all the time. Accessibility.
What a great way to wrap it up. Everything should be everywhere. Accessibility, followed by unionize and eat the rich.
Eat the rich.
So I guess starting with Jeff, say where we can find you, your show, just little plugs before we end the stream.
Sure. Sorry, I'm really bad at this kind of thing. You can find the show at greaterbostonshow.com and at pretty much every podcatcher I think that exists. Our Twitter is at in Greater Boston. We tweet a lot. You can find me on Twitter at Dreason, first letter, last name. And I just want to say thank you to everyone, because I learned a lot just sitting here for an hour and change from all of you. And I hope to work to be better at this issue, because I think it's really important. And I am going to try. Oh, sorry.
Yeah,
I'm going to try to amplify my voice to help make more change as well.
And let's not shortchange you. You did bring up some good questions that also led to more learning opportunities, which is exactly what you should aim to do to help the community and the people who need it.
Thanks, Bridge.
Eli, do you want
Yeah.
to... socials, plugs? Where can we find you?
Yep. I am on Twitter at accessthepod, which is just my rambling about podcasts and transcripts and sometimes trigger warnings. If you're ever interested in following me and having my morose taste of the world, I am actually, that's the point. I think I am autistic geode as well. I think there is also a link in my pinned tweet on my Twitter. Yeah.
All right, Erin.
So you can find me on Twitter at Erin Kyan, ErinKyan. You can find out all about me at my website, erinkyan.com. I make shows that are linked on both those places. Yeah, if this is a topic that interests you, I am happy to do consulting on this. By all means, shoot me a DM. And I am hopefully working on a much longer article about accessibility in podcasting that is a couple of months away, because it's a monster that's already 6,000 words long. So, yes.
Yikes. I want to read that.
And Mischa?
Okay. You can find my shows on most podcast platforms. The Right Sessions, LeVar Burton Reads, Ars Paradoxica, The Far Meridian, Star Tripper, Caravan. The AM Archives is coming to Luminary sometime in the next couple months. I'm working on another Stitcher show that's coming probably by the fall that I can't say what it is yet. Whisperforge shows, we're probably going to put out at least 4 more podcasts before the end of 2019.
Oh my goodness. Are you serious?
We're trucking over here. You can find me. You can find me personally. Fortunately, they're not all made by me this time.
Oh, that's good.
We found some other staff members to put on these shows. You can find me.
About you.
Thanks.
That's good,
when I'm not sleeping per Dr. Jeff's recommendation, I can be found ranting on Twitter at Mischa, etc. at MISCHAETC.
All right, and I've been your moderator, Bridge. You can find me at Audio Gremlin on Twitter. I work on Tides podcast, almost every podcatcher. Arden is another one that I do. Other than that, yeah, that's where you can find me. And this has been the Podcaster Roundtable panel on accessibility. Thank you guys for being here and talking.
Yay!
Yeah,
thank you
for
for listening.
listening.
Great being here.
All right.
Bye, fam.
This was fun. Bye.
Bye.
Happy broadcast.
Bye, all. Nice talking with you.
Bye.